Hey, welcome to the Do Good Work podcast. Today we're talking to Luke Owings. He's the VP of Product at Abilitie. Abilitie is a leadership development company that offers virtual mini MBAs and business simulations that help senior executives from companies around the world build leadership skills and improve strategic and strategy execution. Since 2015, they've taught over 25,000 executives over 50 countries. Some of their clients include the Fortune 500, such as PayPal, Marriott, Coca-Cola, GE, and Southwest Airlines. And in 2020, Abilitie was recognized as one of the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing private companies and the Inc. best workplaces in America. Luke is also an advisory board member for Haymakers for Hope, a nonprofit that has raised $20 million for cancer cure research. And before joining Abilitie, Luke was an expert associate partner at McKinsey and Company that is a trusted advisor to 2/3 of the Fortune 1000 businesses and governments around the world. He holds a BA in economics from Princeton University and an MBA from Harvard Business School, and was also a teaching fellow for Harvard University's undergrad economics class. And him, along with Abilitie, are on a mission to build leadership skills through cohort-based business competitions and virtual mini MBA programs. All right, Luke, thanks for being on, man.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Luke, it's always interesting to talk to different businesses you say you're in the education market. I know that the education training online space, at least based on the projections as of today, right? This might change. It's like a $1.5, $2 trillion industry. And when we were talking before, I'm just curious to know, like, well, how is education transformed now? I mean, we're in the midst of remote first, nomad, freedom, support of like not being very synchronous, but asynchronous. But how does the education now have to evolve to meet us where we're at? And what does that future look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's changing so much. And so many of the things I graduated college in '07, right? So many of the things that were true back then are not true right now. When I graduated college, there was this expectation that you finished college and you got your job, then you learned at your job and continued on. Now the skills you need are things that didn't even exist when you were in school. And so you have to continue it. And so there's this trend toward the lifelong. There's also this trend toward, having a way of building your skills in a community around. And that's where I think you see the rise in a lot of these virtual courses. You see them in the rise of the Section 4s of the world where they're doing cohort-based stuff. You also see it in the rise of us, right? Like we have our Invited MBA, which is a 12-week part-time program that's full of immersive experiences for you to continue to learn. And I think that that's all an artifact of, as you're learning, that you're continuing to build up your connections and network because people are switching jobs more and more. And so, there's this trend toward the lifelong, there's this trend toward continuing your networking, continuing your growth of connections. I think the last trend that you see right now, which is kind of interesting, for a long time, or actually the last couple of years, the push was getting more to individuals to pay for their own education, to pay for their own professional development.
Yeah.
And now companies are starting to see it. And you and I have talked about this in the past. Companies are starting to see it as a retention tool as well. They're starting to see training, particularly in the virtual space, as a way of keeping top talent and as a way of helping them find the culture that they care about when they don't necessarily have one physical space they're in. And so there's a lot of trends happening in this, and it's really quite fascinating to be in the middle of them.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. I want to dive into that in a second, but in my opinion right now, like let's look at, the difference between taking an online course or learning from a guru or learning from someone who if you look at like the master classes of the world, like I don't ever need to go to Mars or to space, right? Like it's cool to learn about that, but that's not practical or tactical for my life. I mean, no, master class has amazing courses, but I mean, you're just trying to get the practicality. The mix between online education that's outdated as it's recorded to the cohort-based stuff. Where's the value that you see the most intertwined with what the market needs today and tomorrow? And how are businesses, especially what you're doing at Abilitie, meeting that demand?
Yeah. It's interesting. Masterclass is a fascinating thing because you can watch Malcolm Gladwell talk about writing. You can watch Serena Williams talk about playing tennis. And in many ways, it's kind of like Netflix for education, right?
Yeah.
Like, cool, it's fun, but like, are you really going to learn tennis by watching that? I don't know. Or is that
you got to practice. It's good to see the mindset of the professionals at that level, how they believe, what they believe, how they think, how they execute, but you got to go out and practice. So there's that component.
And I think that is so true. It's like an inspirational piece, right? So some of those things can be inspirational. There's another set of like the video-based asynchronous world, like LinkedIn Learning, which is really practical and really technical, right?
Yep.
Like if you want to learn how to do a pivot table, go watch 8 videos on how to do a pivot table and then build a pivot table and then do a pivot table and then watch a video on how you can do it better, right? Like LinkedIn Learning is really good at those super technical things that have a right answer.
Mhm.
What neither of those are good at, which I think is where the cohort-based synchronous learning is
Mhm.
learning how to collaborate, learning the softer skills of business, learning how to be conversant in the language of finance and put that into your decision-making process. Actually working with people who have different views than you and coming together and really challenging yourself to learn what you don't know about their jobs. And in today's world, you've crafted your own set of careers, your own set of jobs that are all kind of networked all over these places. And to do that, you have to have conversancy, you have to have connections, you have to have confidence. And none of those things are done very well by watching a video. They're done well by having an intense immersive experience where you're actually learning how to do something. And that's where we, as Invited MBA and Ability with our leadership development programs, really fit.
I think that's actually really, really insightful and really important because it develops a keen sense of empathy as well as collaborative communication, which is, in my opinion, there's two cruxes to succeed online as companies start to grow and go for remote first, which is the wave of the future, is one, your ability to be self-organized and self-disciplined and to execute. Because I mean, if you don't, if it's really a wave, a cataclysmic wave of information and actions and stuff with the technology and the tools that you use every day to do your
Totally.
job. But second is the communication piece. So talk to me a little bit more about the experience of how you harness, because it's easy to say we're just going to get everyone on a Zoom and do these things, as opposed to like how do you make the remote delightful versus being in a room?
Yeah. It's such a great point. And Zoom is wonderful in many ways and really a drawback in many other ways. How many times have we all logged on to a Zoom? There's 30 people sitting there and they're all just sitting there waiting for someone to say something. And then at the end, they all just log off, all of a sudden just disappear into the ether. So first and foremost is for our Invited MBA, we actually don't use Zoom anymore. We use a platform called Gather, which is
Hmm.
a two-dimensional metaverse platform, which gives you an avatar that you're actually walking around, coming to case studies with, interacting with other people on. And the real key piece of it is that you get to decide who to talk to when. You get to move your avatar over close to them. You get to have the conversations that really are rich if you're at a business school where you turn
Mhm.
left to your partner and say, I don't understand that. Like, what does that mean? Where you turn right to your partner and they're like, here's what I think. Right. And so
Mhm.
we actively have created an environment that allows that. And what we've seen is when we're running a synchronous session, participants logging on 30 minutes early to have a coffee chat with somebody who they found interesting,
Mhm.
participants staying after to continue a conversation that they started in the course. And I think that this is kind of the not only promise, but the actual experience of the metaverse, which changes the game. So I think that's one piece of it. The platform really does matter here because
Mhm.
agency is such a core piece of learning the skills you've talked about for the future of work. Secondly, is I think, you also have to have the right experiences for people to go through. No matter how brilliant a speaker is, if you're sitting there listening to a speaker, it's going to be very hard for you to change how you do something. You
Mhm.
actually have to do something and practice it,
Yep.
which is why our whole curriculum is built around simulations where you actually get put in the role of a CEO and actually have to make decisions for your business and look at the financial impact of those through the financial statements. You better believe you understand depreciation when you make an investment in a capital expenditure and over the course of time, see it show up on your income statement and show up on your cash flow statement. Right. And so, like, actually doing things we think is incredibly powerful. And the adult learning research really backs this up, particularly when you can do those in a social environment, which is cohort based learning.
It's like gamification meets real world experience meets like a personal challenge that actually there will be eventually like that draw between what my actual job is versus that case study or like that virtual company that I'm running for this education purpose only and being able to, what have the same emotions and feedback loops for both.
100%. And there's so much power in this. I have my actually out in New Hampshire here with my family, with my nephews who are 9 and 12, and it looks like they're walking through right now. Good to see them. But I will say that they've learned more from video games than I've seen anywhere else, right? They
Hmm.
wanted to become better at Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda. So they learned how to read better and they learned how to look through an encyclopedia and they learned how to actually do calculations about what their equipment would do and how it would make their character better. And that type of motivation is such a key canvas for learning in so many ways.
I think it's also the interactions with others because I mean, if you think about the traditional route of MBAs, like I personally wanted and I visited, for fun Stanford here in California just to go. Cause I'm like, yeah, I love to do this. I'm in business. This is probably the future. And we went there, et cetera. But when you think about it, why do people go? I mean, there's multiple reasons too, right? And I'm not here to judge or make a judgment statement on the value of an MBA or not. Personally, I don't see any more value in it right now. Maybe you changed my mind this communication, but it's all about the network and the relationships you build, right? Because I believe that the real world experience is your MBA. So I kind of want to ask your perception of why should people care about getting, if it is an MBA or if it is that next certification, like why do we care about that versus getting real world results and trying something new and kind of I'm strong manning that argument.
I think it's a great point, and it's a great thought experiment to go into. And so from my perspective, MBAs have value often when you're at points of transition, when you're
Mhm.
not sure how to go into the next thing, when you're not sure how to attack it. And when they do really well, what they do is they give you three things. They give you conversancy, they give you connections, and they give you confidence. Right.
Yeah.
And if those three things coming out of an MBA, then you're in much better shape. Right. You have conversancy in the language of business so that when you actually when you go talk to a business you're interested in working for, when you go interview, you are not intimidated by them using financial terms. You're not intimidated by them talking about different parts of the business. Right. So you have conversancy. Secondly, you have connections. And I think connections are such a crucial part of an MBA, both because they create opportunities for you, but also they let you see what other paths exist.
Mhm.
Oftentimes when we're in times of transition, we don't know what we don't know. And so meeting somebody who has gone down another path is really powerful for opening eyes. And then lastly, they give you confidence where you can wade into that ambiguity and you actually can go and you can say, okay, I wasn't confident going in here. We've all had imposter syndrome. I've had imposter syndrome many times in my life. And what are the things that are going to let me be willing to make that first step and wade into it? And so I mean, I think a good MBA program does some combination of those three, as well as creating opportunities in some way, shape, or form. And let me be let me be wildly optimistic and say you can do that without paying $200,000.
Well, then that's the crux. And I think even to add to that too, and it's something that you mentioned, I'm not sure if it was earlier in our previous convo, was the level of understanding of another person's role and having that level of empathy. Cause I believe those are the soft skills that are going to be more critical as we move forward
Totally.
with the higher leverage of technology, the higher leverage of connectability, even having delusions between what is reality and what is virtual reality. We might have that conversation maybe 5 years from now, 8 years, who knows, like how fast. But I think also having that level of empathy for another human being and being able to connect, I think that's a missing component. And when it comes to levels of transition, who was at the World Economic Forum talking about how reskilling and upskilling is the most important critical piece. And when you look at it, there's three cruxes, right? When to do it, the timing of the market. I mean,
Yeah.
right now is the time of the market. Two, when does it become important? Right now is important to do that. And then three, I think mechanisms of being aware of what's out there, what to do,
Yeah.
being able to do that. How, and the question really isn't how or what, but what's the difference between an MBA that I get from, the Harvards or the Stanfords or the big names or whatever versus something remote online and not, I mean, let's call them like the Davids of the world.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I went to Harvard. I graduated from Harvard Business School in 2011. And the biggest difference is just it's a different paradigm. I spent 2 years of my life putting everything else on hold and going back there. I went
Mhm.
through hundreds of case studies with the same group of people with the same cohort. I spent countless hours of time preparing for interviews, doing interviews, recognizing that my whole rest of my life was on hold at that
Mhm.
moment. I think the push with a lot of the players right now, and again, I use us because I know us the best as an example, invited MBA, is that this is actually learning you should do while the rest of your life is not on hold. This
Hmm.
is learning that you should do as you continue on. And so, for example, our 12-week program is designed to be done on Wednesday nights and Saturdays. And so that you continue your job, you continue the work you're doing, and you don't have to put everything else on pause. From a learning perspective, that's actually really powerful because you can immediately put into application the skills that you have. Learning the skills of being a manager and you're learning how to give coaching and feedback. That's actually something you can immediately bring back to your day job. And I think that has a lot of power to it. I think it does have the weaker point of like, hey, you just don't get as much time. You don't get as immersed in 2 years of sitting there thinking. And if you're
Hmm.
one of those people who wants to go hermit for a little while and sit and reflect and look off into the distance. And in business school, that's really just going to happy hours and drinking a lot of beer and playing intramural sports. Then maybe you need that. But for us, right, like if your focus is on, building some of that conversancy, pushing your career to the next step, transitioning to your next step, you can do that in so much cheaper and easier ways. I just have to say.
So this is again for transition points, those who want to be able to leverage the power of scale online,
Yeah.
understand that this is remote, still get that level of experience and connectivity. I think I mean, with any marketing or any sales, like it's just good to know who is this for, who is this not for. And kind of understanding too, like this is one path of many, right? These things that we laid out can be learned solo, can be learned on multiple locations, but there's also accelerators to be able to do, cut the time in half or a fourth or, if I'm transitioning right now in a job or in a career with the market or the skill, like wanting to reskill and upskill, like what are some of the key motivators to have and what are some of the key insights to be looking for? Because we don't get everything from an activity unless we are intentional about the actions that we're taking and get the most out of it. So what is the intentions behind taking this leap or taking this initiative? And what are some of those key factors to look into?
Yeah. So I'll get slightly epistemological and say that, in order to be intentional, you have to know what you don't know. And I think
But you don't know what you don't know. That's tough, right? How do you know? You got to understand metaphysics first before you can.
yeah, it's a really interesting thing. It's like, how do you know what you don't know? And I think a lot of these programs do a really good job. Like a program like ours does a good job of helping you gain awareness of things you don't know, which puts
Mhm.
you on a path, right? And that path is actually really powerful to
Yeah,
put you on.
100%.
Yeah.
You
It seems
nailed it
like
on the head. I love that. You have to have that path, and that's the a unique proposition, at least for you, in terms of the marketplace, and it helps the student or the learner because, like, you don't know what you don't know, right?
if you don't know what you don't know, I mean, you can be like the Cheshire Cat and Alice in Wonderland and just keep going and you'll get there. But you won't get to a place you want to get. And I think that it has such power to be part of a group that's helping you learn what you don't know to set those goals. And so that you can be on that path. Because after a 12-week program, learning's not done, right? You need to
Yeah,
continue learning. You need to continue growing. There's a whole set of things you need to continue doing. And that's okay. That's where the intentionality you're saying comes into place. That's where the community of people who believe in you, who know you, who work with you come into place. That's where all these things happen. And it's a beautiful thing.
no, I completely agree. Let's shift gears here, just kind of give you perspective on market, what we're seeing, and see some trends more as a response, as opposed to reaction of what's happening, what's going to happen, et cetera. And, looking at the trends, looking at businesses as a whole right now, and where you mentioned in the beginning of leveraging education like this for companies for retention and creating culture. What makes you say that? Because that was a hypothesis that I had with some business leaders online. And I kind of would be curious to see your insights as here's what's actually happening in the marketplace right now. And here's like some of the companies that are investing in their people and why it's important to even think about this.
Yeah. Let me just give the lens I'm coming at this from. So right now I'm the VP of product at a company called Abilitie, and we do leadership development programs and we run the invited MBA. Before that, I spent multiple years as an associate partner at McKinsey, the big consulting firm. And I actually helped build out and lead a lot of our programs within McKinsey Academy, where we did learning and development and leadership development for our clients, for the Fortune 50 clients, and built their high level executive leadership programs. And so these comments that you just mentioned of like how companies are using training, how companies are thinking of training, and how they're using it as both a retention tool and a culture building tool come from both of those experiences and working with a lot of large enterprises on this. On the retention tool side, I think what you see is, and again, the last 2 years have really accelerated this great resignation of, hey, people being willing to leave jobs, people being willing to move from one company to another, companies saying, oh, how am I going to keep these high potential people, these future leaders of mine, when there's almost no friction to them leaving a job, joining another job, and sitting on the same couch in their same
Mhm.
home, working the same way? Right. And so one of the answers they've come to is, hey, we are going to develop our people. We are going to invest in them, and we are going to invest in them in a way that makes them feel invested in. And
Mm.
that comes both from the learning and development programs and then from the opportunities that get created on the back end. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And you can look at the marketing data around clients that we have where we've run their programs for high potentials. You can look at it for a company like Guild Education, which does it with huge clients like Walmart and Disney and Starbucks, and
Yep.
say, wow, they are really seeing retention up, and they're seeing that as a tool for such. The second piece on the culture side, as we were working with executive leadership, both in my time at McKinsey and now, and we're often blessed to get to work on what is the program that your top 100 leaders go through. What I've seen as the trend is a lot of, okay, we'll start with some skills, but really what comes down to is what is the leadership development model for how we want to lead? And then we're measuring results based on that.
In the alignment, that congruency between how we lead, our values, our culture, our, the mission, vision, whatever.
Absolutely.
I mean, not just putting it on a wall, but actually practicing it and applying it to a program.
And this is actually a place where, I mean, if you look at what's happening, companies are becoming much better at measuring that, right? They're becoming much better. And companies like McKinsey have things like an organizational health index, which says,
Hmm.
okay, how does the organization work? How am I measuring culture? You see a lot of companies entering this space and getting a sense for how do you measure culture? And then if you can measure culture, does it lead to financial results on the far end? And then on the near end, can you actually impact that with learning and development and training? And I think we see more companies doing that. And so for me, it's pretty clear that companies are seeing, if you need to learn Excel, go on LinkedIn Learning. Great. Learn a
Mhm.
pivot table. Great. If you need to actually invest in your people and build a community that retains, actually run leadership development programs. If you need to build a culture of the future in a world where everyone is virtual in their own tiny little Zoom or Gather or whatever bubble they are, training is one of the great tools for that.
Do you go as far, and I'm not sure if like this is the programs that you're running right now, but do you go as far as customizing that training to fit the leadership development and the goals of the company? Or is it more here are the standards and here's some customization? What's the balance?
Yeah, if I think of customization, I think of it as a spectrum of customization, adaptation, and tailoring. And oftentimes the customization isn't really that much needed. A lot of the same tools are at different companies. How you give feedback is the same at 80% of the Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
relatively the same. What does change is, culturally, what is the right tone to be setting on this? Are we a place that holds people hugely accountable? Are we a caring meritocracy? What are we? Right. And this becomes
Mhm.
tone cultural. And then lastly, on the tailoring piece, it becomes how do we make sure that, it fits into their actual life, right? Like how you actually manage your teams, what's the cadence you do these things, all that stuff. And so I think that a lot of these tools and a lot of the learning, not a ton of customization has
I
to
mean,
happen.
it's humans, right? Humans aren't going to change as much, but like you're saying, it's the language that we use around it. How to say the same sentence 20 different times, depending on the modality that you want to approach your people. But the last piece, maybe that's what I meant by the tailoring. It's a smarter
Yeah.
way of putting it. Of how do we make it practical to you and how your team works?
Yeah. Practical, applicable. How will we actually make sure it's something that changes how you behave and what you do? So I think it's powerful stuff, and it's really interesting what's happening in our space. I don't know. How do you see our space from your vantage point?
I see like it's an investment right now. I think it's a strategic investment to as a savings, like an insurance policy. That's my perspective.
Makes sense. And you're looking at it from the business owner perspective, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, for the business owner perspective to be able to see that. And I think even from a consumer or a worker perspective, it is important to what are the skills that you don't have, and also how do you work in this new modality? Because for some people who, digital native, like native digitals, cool, they can run, they can do it.
Yep.
But for those who are analog, this is a huge gap. Plus, being able to adapt, plus be able to stay competitive, plus be able to understand the trends, plus be able to know and be comfortable with super fast change. And then also for both the analogs and the digitals to have empathy.
Yeah. It's so important, right? Like, man, empathy, empathy, empathy. The more we get technical, the more we get digital, the more we get down this path, the more it becomes about people. And it's really hard.
I mean, Andreessen was talking about that recently. That and that was my thesis, and since I think 2012 or whatever, that the future of business is more humanity, and for us to be able to have those conversations, like why are we talking about the arts, the crafts, the humanities? Why? Who cares about it? Why?
Yeah.
Why should we care? I think it's an important question.
It's important on so many fronts. I think it's important from the perspective of how we engage with each other, right? Because technological tools are taking a lot of the grunt work, for lack of a better word, off our
Yeah.
plates. And so we're engaging with each other and we have access to more tools. And then it's also really important from the perspective of, do we want to do these things? What's the value base behind it? I come from a liberal arts education, and so much of that is trying to define or trying to give us tools to be like, not only can I do this, but I really want to do this because of this. And, you know,
Yeah.
um, we could go way, I mean, I can tell already you and I could go way deep down talking about the merits of companies like Facebook or anything like that, or
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, we have to have you on another pod. I think Luke
we'll do
for
that
for for this
with a
combo.
couple Coors Lights, maybe, because I live so long in Colorado. You and I will grab some, or I don't know what do they drink in San Diego? Is it like a mojito or something like this?
Oh, we got the local breweries here, like the local shops. I think Dallas is one of the bigger ones, but yeah, definitely if you're ever out here, we'll do that. It's an interesting concept, not to gloss over it, but I think it is important to look at merit. Why should we care about virtue? Why should we care about the work that we do? Why should we care about the impact? Especially now with the new wave of younger workers caring about working for someplace that actually gives a damn,
Totally.
right? So no, I loved our conversation. Luke, share us with where can we learn more about the programs that you help run and facilitate, or just help develop and help promote?
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, if you're coming from a corporate side, you're welcome to come visit us on abilitie.com. That's abilitie.com. We run leadership development programs for a lot of the Fortune 500, and we would love to work with you. We do simulation-based learning, which is highly immersive and highly coming together. If you're a solopreneur, if you're in transition, if you're looking for your own education as a person, we actually have adapted our offerings to create a mini MBA, and that's called invitedmba.com. So just go to invitedmba.com. Check us out. It's a 12-week part-time program, highly synchronous, highly sim based. We really spend a lot of time building a community around your cohort, so you get to answer some of these questions we've been talking about here. If you mentioned that you came on this podcast, we'd be happy to give you a $200 tuition credit. The sticker price is only $18.50 in the first place. And actually, our first
that's
early bird special is tomorrow, July 15th. I don't know when this is going to go, so I'll just say July 15th. And you're also welcome to apply for a later one. Again, mention that you heard this, and we'll give you a tuition credit. We also have a limited number of scholarships. And so if you want to learn business skills and cost is getting in your way, reach out to us. That our goal is to create accessible business education that comes out of the world-class stuff we do with corporations. And so, we're here to keep on growing. We're here to work with you, and we're excited to be a part of whatever your learning journey may be. Again, invitedmba.com.
and we'll put all those links in the show notes. And just so everyone knows, like there's no like affiliate back. I don't get any commissions off of this. This is just sharing value to the marketplace and having a good conversation with Luke. But Luke, it's an honor to have you on, man. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Appreciate you.